Tonight at 10, Suella Braverman accuses the Prime Minister of betraying the nation in a scathing letter after she was sacked. She launches an all-out attack on his leadership and integrity a day after he removed her as Home Secretary. A new team around the cabinet table this morning, but how damaging could her words prove to be?
Her letter is eye-wateringly excoriating. I've never seen a resignation like it.
And neither have I. Word after word, page after page, dripping with derision. We'll bring you more on what she had to say and what it might mean.
Also on the programme tonight, the White House and the Pentagon say they have intelligence that supports Israel's claims that Hamas are operating from tunnels below Gaza's hospitals. McDonald's fires more than a dozen workers in the UK after a BBC investigation into claims of harassment, bullying and racism. And we report from Iceland as a town is evacuated amid growing fears of a volcanic eruption there.
On BBC London, tributes to a family including 3 children who died in a Hounslow house fire, and halfway through a major milestone for what will be the country's biggest station.
Good evening. Suella Braverman has launched an all-out attack on the Prime Minister a day after he sacked her as Home Secretary. In a letter to the Prime Minister, she told Rishi Sunak that his plan is not working, the party is running out of time and he needs to change course urgently. The letter was relentless in its personal attacks, strewn with stinging words like weak, betrayal and failed. Let's go straight to Westminster. Our political editor, Chris Mason, is there.
You picked 3 words there, Sophie. You've left plenty more for me to go at. Here are a few more. Wishful thinking, no appetite for doing what is necessary, equivocation and lack of interest. Downing Street said tonight the Prime Minister's focus was on actions, not words, after this letter that challenges his competence and his integrity.
What's the line? It never rains but it pours. Suella Braverman's done it again. As you might just have noticed, the former Home Secretary specialises in verbal downpours. Her latest target, the Prime Minister. Here were the two of them back in March. There aren't any kisses on her letter to him tonight. She claims they did a deal. She'd back him to be Prime Minister if he delivered on key promises, including on immigration. In her missive, she writes, "You have manifestly and repeatedly failed to deliver on every single one of these key policies. Either your distinctive style of government means you are incapable of doing so, or, as I must surely conclude now, you never had any intention of keeping your promises." Suella Braverman once said her dream and obsession was to see planes taking off to Rwanda with illegal migrants on board. She claimed she came up with ideas to stop the policy being blocked by the European Convention on Human Rights, which the UK is signed up to. You ignored these arguments. You opted instead for wishful thinking as a comfort blanket to avoid having to make hard choices. This irresponsibility has wasted time and left the country in an impossible position. She also repeats her criticism of the pro-Palestinian marches in London, saying more should have been done to ban them. "I regret to say that your response has been uncertain, weak and lacking in the qualities of leadership that this country needs."
Her letter is eye-wateringly excoriating. I've never seen a resignation like it. I can't recall one from history.
The Prime Minister...
A Cabinet Minister finding himself on the radio had a go at claiming there's not much to see here.
Cabinet reshuffles are nothing new, and as we go into what is probably a year before the next general election, it would be rather unusual, actually, if the Cabinet was not reset at that point. What I experienced this morning when I attended Cabinet was a united Cabinet.
United, having got rid of Suella Braverman. This is what Mel Stride was talking about.
This strong and united team is going to...
The new Cabinet met today. New faces, old faces and old new faces. But this rejig, including David Cameron, is winding up some Conservatives who say the party's moved on since the EU referendum.
2016 was a mark, which should have been a line in the sand saying we are going to move from that political consensus back towards the views of ordinary people. There was a sign of hope of that in 2019, but my fear about the reshuffle is that it marks that we've moved the other way.
As for Labour, you won't be surprised they're saying
Suella Braverman's letter is just the latest instalment in a Tory psychodrama that's been playing out over the last 13 years.
Cabinet reshuffles sometimes go unnoticed. Not this one. Chris Mason, BBC News at Westminster.
Well, the former Home Secretary's letter comes ahead of tomorrow's crucial ruling by the Supreme Court on the lawfulness of the government's scheme to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda to claim asylum there. Our Home Editor, Mark Easton, reports.
The new Home Secretary has barely got through the door of his office, but James cleverly faces the real threat that within 48 hours of his arrival, the centrepiece of his department's illegal migration policy will be in tatters.
I had a very good conversation with the Prime Minister, who's made it very clear that he wants us to deliver on our promises, to stop the boats.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With the Prime Minister's demands still ringing in his ears, civil servants will have briefed him on his narrowing options should tomorrow morning's Supreme Court judgment be that sending asylum seekers to Rwanda is unlawful. The government believes that by swiftly relocating cross-channel arrivals to East Africa, the business model of the people smuggling gangs will be fatally damaged. 615 arrived on the Kent coast on Sunday alone.
There is a serious and pressing need to take effective steps that will act as a deterrent.
The government wants the Supreme Court justices to overturn the appeal court's conclusion that genuine refugees sent to Rwanda might end up back in the country from which they fled, breaching their human rights under the European Convention. If the government wins tomorrow, ministers are hopeful that flights will take off for Rwanda before Christmas. If they lose, it's thought the Home Office will seek a new treaty with the Rwandan government to take account of the concerns of the Supreme Court justices. But there are some in the Conservative Party who argue the real problem is the UK's commitment to the European Convention on Human Rights. As Foreign Secretary, Mr Cleverly said he was not convinced the UK needed to leave the convention. As Home Secretary, will he still think the same tomorrow? Mark Easton, BBC News.
Let's go back to Chris Mason now. How big a deal is tomorrow, and where does today leave the Prime Minister?
Tomorrow, Sophie, is a landmark day in the government of Rishi Sunak. Why do I say that? That is because the Rwanda plan is a benchmark, flagship policy that has been bogged down in the courts for ages and reaches its final moment at around about 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, were the government to win, it would be a huge moment politically, psychologically, a reset after all the trouble that Rishi Sunak has confronted. But the expectation within government, as Mark was reflecting, is that they will probably lose, may even be quite a messy outcome, a qualified yes or a qualified no. And then there would be a row that would break out about why it has happened and what should happen next. And Suella Braverman might just be a contributor, I suspect, to that row. Where do her contributions so far leave Rishi Sunak? Where we are tonight is that there are clumps of disagreement and discombobulation within the Conservative Party, and they are finding a voice. Some of them unhappy with the reshuffle, some of them unhappy at what they see as a lack of direction within the government. The question now is to what extent do they kind of coagulate into some sort of bigger thing that causes Rishi Sunak a real headache? Because after all of the chaos of the last couple of years, the Conservative Party is getting a little world weary for whipping up yet more internal civil war. But then again, after the last few years, who knows?
Chris Mason, thank you. The White House and the Pentagon say they have intelligence that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad are operating from tunnels below hospitals, including Gaza's largest, Al-Shifa, and are also storing weapons there. It's the first time they have so fully supported Israel's claims. The Gaza Strip has been under siege by the Israel Defense Forces since Hamas launched its attacks in Israel on the 7th of October. Hamas, which governs Gaza, is designated a terrorist organisation by the UK. Israel says the Al-Shifa hospital compound conceals an underground command centre used by Hamas, a claim that doctors deny. Despite its new intelligence, the US says hospitals and patients must be protected. Today, the government in the UK issued its toughest criticism yet of how Israel is waging war in Gaza. The Foreign Office Minister, Andrew Mitchell, said too many civilians were dying as he condemned the violence around the hospital. Our chief international correspondent, Orla Guerin, has the story. Her report contains distressing images.
War now resounds through deserted streets. This is Gaza City. Israel is pushing forward in Gaza despite international concern about the cost. Its forces closing in on key targets, even planting Israel's flag inside the Hamas parliament. Its tanks are at the gates of Al-Shifa hospital. The White House now says it has intelligence that there is a Hamas command centre under Al-Shifa. But it says the hospital and the patients must be protected. And here are some of the most vulnerable, in a carefully choreographed video released by the Hamas-run Health Ministry. It appears to show premature babies being transferred to an area which is well lit with equipment working. The ministry says they had to be moved here when their incubators lost power. We can't verify this. In the grounds, so many decomposing bodies that a mass grave has been dug.
The dead bodies which have been in the hospital for more than 5 days now, more than 120 dead bodies within the hospital areas. With a very bad smell there, and we are sure all kinds of infections and diseases will be transmitted from that one.
Just across the Gaza border inside Israel, we joined ultra-Orthodox volunteers today, confronting the darkest horrors. They are still searching for fragments of human remains inside bomb shelters where Israelis hid in terror last month when Hamas attacked. Well, the search has just begun here, but already the team have found human remains. This difficult, painstaking work is going on every day. DNA tests are continuing. Funerals are still being held. For Israel, October the 7th hasn't ended. It is an ongoing national trauma. What you find here could bring an answer to some families.
Yes, sure. This is why we do this job. And we want to bring those families the announcement about their beloved ones.
Of course, it's the last thing they want to hear, that they're gone.
Yes, definitely. It's the last thing they want to hear, but they want to hear something.
That must be very hard to take away with you.
It's something that probably will remain with me for the rest of my life. But it's a sacrifice I'm ready to do.
The volunteers themselves get counselling to cope with what they see. Orla Guerin, BBC News, on the Israel-Gaza border.
More than half of Gaza's hospitals are now non-functional, according to the World Health Organization. More than 1,000 babies are being born every week in Gaza on average. Our correspondent Yogita Limai, who can't get into Gaza, has been working with a freelance journalist, Majdi Fatih, who lives there, and has used his footage to tell the story of the mothers struggling to find a safe place to give birth.
Born in a precarious world, this little boy is 1 day old, still to be named. His parents fled bombings in Gaza City. Under the stress of war, he's been born prematurely and needs help to breathe. In the next bed, a 4-day-old girl who's critical. There's been no time to name her either, and they're running out of medicines which could treat her. Incubators are still on at the Al-Aqsa hospital in central Gaza, but the fighting is drawing closer. This is Hassan, named by hospital staff. Both his parents were killed in bombings. He was found cradled in his mother's arms. It's a painful time in Gaza. It's excruciating for new mothers. 4 days ago, Kifa Abu Asar's baby girl was born. She was heavily pregnant when she was forced to flee her home.
I've had to run more than once, walking under the constant threat of being bombed. I saw people's bodies being ripped apart. I faced extreme exhaustion and was scared for my baby's life. At hospital, I got no painkillers while giving birth.
Asma has walked with her 3 children for more than 15 miles. She's pregnant. This is refuge in a hospital compound. My children sleep on the sheet, I sleep on the ground, she says. So many women suffered miscarriages due to the terrifying sound of the explosions. I was scared I'd lose my baby. Sometimes I felt like I couldn't feel my baby move, she says. I had to carry my child and our bags. My children have been exposed to such horrors. Dead bodies, cars bombed with people inside. This is what she now faces, along with hundreds of thousands. People who had homes and jobs, boys and girls who had a childhood, struggling for a few drops of water. Yogita Lamai, BBC News, Jerusalem.
McDonald's has fired 18 workers after the BBC spoke to more than 100 staff, current and recent, who made allegations of sexual harassment, bullying and racism at the restaurant chain. The company has now received more than 400 complaints from employees since July after a BBC investigation found that workers as young as 17 were being groped and harassed almost routinely. Today, the boss of McDonald's UK told MPs that he was determined to root out any such behaviour from the business. Our employment correspondent Zoe Conway reports.
McDonald's does 100% have a problem with sexual harassment.
It's just a disgusting behaviour.
I would get really upset about going in and I would cry a lot before my shift.
It was voices like these, heard during the months-long BBC investigation into McDonald's, that led to the chief executive, Alistair McCrow, being summoned to Parliament.
These testimonies are truly, truly horrific. It's very hard to listen to.
In July, the company set up an investigations unit. Today, the CEO revealed it had received 400 complaints, including of sexual harassment, racism and bullying. He said some cases have gone to the police and 18 staff members have been fired.
Mr McCrory, it sounds like profit is more important than protecting workers. It's absolutely not the case. The most important thing in our business is our people. Our people are our brand, our people are the face of McDonald's to our customers. We do everything we can to look after our people.
Employees have told the BBC that when allegations were made about a manager, rather than discipline them, they were moved to another store. For the first time publicly, the CEO admitted this had been happening.
A manager will not be moved to another restaurant to avoid disciplinary. That will now be dealt with within that particular, in that particular restaurant.
Now be dealt with, it wasn't in the past.
Moving people was something that used to occur.
Emily and Ed, 2 ex-McDonald's workers, were in the room as the CEO gave evidence.
When I left the room, what I did feel reassured about was the fact that he would continue to deflect from the issue and make himself and make his whole PR team and make McDonald's as a whole look like they're doing something about something where nothing is being done.
It's upsetting that this is happening on such a huge level that it has come to Parliament.
McDonald's teenage workers feel like they're finally being heard, but they've told us they want the company to go further to keep them safe. Zoe Conway, BBC News.
Now, could chickenpox be made a disease of the past? Health experts are advising the government that all children should be vaccinated against the chickenpox virus as toddlers. But why? Our medical editor Fergus Walsh is here to explain. Fergus.
Thanks, Sophie. Chickenpox is a highly contagious and very common childhood disease triggered by the varicella zoster virus. It causes an itchy, spotty rash with small blisters. In most cases, chickenpox is a mild illness, but the wounds can become infected with bacteria. In rare cases, it can cause brain swelling and even be fatal. 3-year-old Leah spent 9 days in hospital earlier this year after getting chickenpox complications.
Leah was really ill when she got chickenpox. She seemed fine, and then went really downhill. She got sepsis, was treated for cellulitis, blue lighted to the Children's Hospital, and had 2 emergency surgeries to try and save her life. So I would definitely recommend the vaccine if I'd have known then what I know now.
The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation recommends 2 doses of chickenpox vaccine at 12 and 18 months to be combined with the MMR jab in a single shot. It also wants a catch-up programme for older children.
It'll prevent the milder end of the chickenpox cases, which are unpleasant for children and their families, but importantly, prevent the tens of thousands of GP visits each year, the thousands of hospitalisations from chickenpox and its complication, and also the very severe cases and sadly the deaths that occur.
Back in 2009, the JCVI ruled out a vaccine programme over fears it might cause a rise in cases of shingles in middle age. Shingles is a painful condition where the chickenpox virus gets reactivated. But the committee says nearly 30 years of evidence from the US suggests this won't happen. The government says it'll consider the new JCVI recommendation. For now, the vaccine is available privately, but costs around £75 a dose. Sophie.
Fergus, thank you. 7 members of a child sex ring have been convicted of multiple counts of child abuse in what is believed to be the largest prosecution of its kind in Scotland. The 5 men and 2 women were found guilty of a number of charges, including rape and sexual abuse. 4 of them were found guilty of attempted murder. Another woman was found guilty of assault, while 3 people were acquitted of all charges. With more details, here is our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon.
The 8 people whose crimes plunged the depths of human depravity, the judge said. 7 of them, shown here, subjected the children to a catalogue of violence and sexual abuse, including rape. 4 of the gang were also convicted of attempting to murder one of the youngsters by trapping her in a cupboard, a fridge. The case centred around 2 girls and a boy, all under 13. A number of witnesses became emotional as they told the court in Glasgow how the youngsters changed from being happy and friendly to withdrawn and tormented. For 7 years, the children suffered their abuse in silence.
How can this possibly happen in this day and age? But it is unusual, it's extreme, but all of us need to ask ourselves, you know, these were children living in a community that surrounded them and would have been, you know, been around, and it just fills you with horror, the thought that that sort of thing can go unnoticed, and we all need to take a look at ourselves.
One of the youngsters described the location where the abuse took place as the dark and scary Beastie House. Police praised the courage of the victims, who they said were subjected to unimaginable abuse and whose testimony was essential to securing the convictions. Those found guilty will be sentenced in January. Lorna Gordon, BBC News, Glasgow.
A senior officer involved in the Stephen Lawrence murder case was corrupt, according to a secret Metropolitan Police report that's been uncovered by the BBC. The report from the year 2000 said Ray Adams was cleared by a corruption probe which relied on false testimony from a man linked to the family of one of Stephen's killers. The revelation contradicts years of police denial about the role of corrupt officers in the case. Daniel de Simone reports.
The spectre of police corruption has long haunted the Stephen Lawrence murder. For 3 decades, Scotland Yard kept the secret we now expose.
The Met knew about it. That's what's so shocking.
Today we reveal a Met Police report concluded that a senior officer involved in the case, Ray Adams, was corrupt. The early failure to bring Stephen's killers to justice led to suspicion that corruption infected the investigation. Father of one killer was Clifford Norris, a gangster from a criminal family known for suspicious contact with police. The public inquiry into the murder probed the issue. It didn't find corruption.
Somebody contacted us this morning.
Ray Adams, a former commander, appeared as a witness. But I've now seen a secret Scotland Yard report into the Stephen Lawrence case that concludes Ray Adams was corrupt. The report says Ray Adams was cleared by a flawed corruption probe which relied on lies from an informant linked to the Norris crime family. It says a totally fictitious account by the informant discredited a witness against Ray Adams. The informant must have been coached by Ray Adams or another officer, and this amounted to flagrant acts of attempting to pervert the course of justice. The public inquiry into the murder didn't hear about this evidence from the informant. The barrister for Stephen's family says the information would have been key.
The Met seem to have covered up the true nature of Adams. They must have known what he was really like. It would have made, in my view, a very substantial difference.
The informant's evidence discredited a witness against Ray Adams by saying he'd boasted of making false corruption claims about the officer. But the secret report says this was a lie. There was no link between the informant and the witness. It says there was no evidence Ray Adams influenced the murder inquiry. Stephen's family now want further investigation by the Met.
The BBC is doing its job, investigating what happened in Stephen's case. So there's a real need to look at this. And if there is a tiny scintilla of that happening, the Met should take it up with open arms.
Ray Adams told me he's asked the Met to investigate the serious allegations against him. The Met didn't answer my questions. The force says it will review material before deciding whether any further action is required. Stephen's family want justice and the full truth. Daniel DeSimone, BBC News.
The BBC says it's received 2 further complaints about the behaviour of the actor and comedian Russell Brand. The corporation is now investigating a total of 5 complaints about his conduct between 2006 and 2008, when he was employed as a presenter on Radio 2. He has strongly denied any wrongdoing. South Yorkshire police have arrested a man on suspicion of manslaughter following the death of an ice hockey player in Sheffield last month. Adam Johnson, who played for the Nottingham Panthers, suffered a serious neck injury during a match against the Sheffield Steelers. He later died in hospital. Well, Navtesh Johal is in Nottingham for us now. Navtesh.
Sophie, this is where Adam Johnson played for his team, the Nottingham Panthers. And his death has shocked ice hockey fans, not just here in this city or in the UK, but around the world. Last month, he was playing a match for the Panthers against the Sheffield Steelers when his neck was cut by a skate during the game. He was taken to hospital where he was pronounced dead, and a post-mortem examination confirmed that he had died as a result of a fatal neck injury. Now, at the time, the Panthers described it as a freak accident. Now, South Yorkshire Police has today arrested a man on suspicion of manslaughter. He remains in custody, but has so far not been charged. Now, the outpouring of grief that followed Adam Johnson's death is visible here. There are flowers behind me, but the police have asked the public to refrain from any comment or speculation which may hinder this investigation.
Navtesh, thank you. More than 400 people living in a tower block in the Redfield area of Bristol have been evacuated by the City Council following fears that the building is unsafe. The residents have been asked to move out immediately after survey work on 3 flats found major structural faults. Residents are being told to pack enough clothes for a day or 2. Now have a look at this enormous crack which has opened up on a road in Iceland today after the area was hit by hundreds of earthquakes yesterday. A BBC team filming there were among those urged to leave the town of Grindavik, which is under threat from a volcanic eruption. Jessica Parker sent this report.
The long road into Grindavik,
a town on the edge of this volcanic island. Those who've had to leave hope for a chance to briefly return. We get permission to go in. Inside, it's a ghost town that's being violently ripped apart. There's no time to waste for residents. It's grab and go. How does it feel having to pack up all your belongings like this?
It's horrible. Yeah, just terrible. Just getting things for my kids and getting out of here.
They have 5 minutes to decide what to save from further earthquakes or a possible eruption. You really feel the town could be destroyed?
Yeah, I believe so. It's already, half of it is destroyed. And the next few hours or days will tell us what is going to happen.
Suddenly we're told we've got to go.
But everybody...
Evacuation, no. There was a bit of a commotion and we were told the whole area was being evacuated. A stream of cars, those that were in Grindavik, left. Everyone seemed to be packing up. It was, we later hear, alarm that magma may be nearing the surface nearby. The recent earthquakes are beyond what anyone is used to. The wrench of having to leave your home beyond words. Jessica Parker, BBC News in Grindavik.
Time now for a look at the weather. Sarah Keith-Lucas is with us. Hello.
Hi, Sophie. Well, we've seen Storm Debbie moving away today, but the tail end of that storm system has still brought us some wet weather, so it's been another unsettled, pretty soggy autumn day for many of us. This was the picture in Kirklees a little bit earlier on. So we've had some big shower clouds, rainbows around too. Now, for some of us, we're set to see a little bit of a drier window of weather, particularly in the south, actually, through the day tomorrow. It's looking bright and breezy, but certainly a north-south split. So the northern half of the UK will stay cloudier with some outbreaks of rain around too. Down to the fact that we've got low pressure and a weather front. Now that is bringing a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain for the rest of tonight across Scotland. Some showers too for the likes of County Londonderry and Trim as well. To the south of that across England and Wales, it's clearer, it's drier. Most of us looking frost-free, but it will turn a little colder across the far north of Scotland, particularly up towards the Northern Isles, in fact, as we see clearer skies. But through the day tomorrow, the weather won't change in a hurry because we've still got the cloud and outbreaks of rain through central and southern Scotland for a time for Northern Ireland and into the far north of England. It should clear up for Northern Ireland and for Wales and central and southern England. Some sunshine on offer. Temperatures around about 7 to 10 in the north, 10 to 13 towards the south, and something a little bit brighter developing for the likes of Aberdeenshire, Caithness and Sutherland as well. But further south across Scotland into northern England, it stays quite grey and damp all day. Something a little bit quieter as we head overnight into Thursday, but quite soon on Thursday, the next area of low pressure approaches from the southwest, and we've got another weather front moving in from the west later on as well. So I think Thursday, pretty unsettled day. More rain for parts of southern England and Wales. Later on, some rain for Northern Ireland. Probably for eastern Scotland and northeast England, you should stay dry for quite a good part of the day. But I think most of us should see a window of dry weather again into Friday before things turn unsettled, wet and windy again for the weekend. Sophie.
Thank you very much. That is it from the BBC News at 10. Newsnight with Kirsty is over on BBC Two right now. Now, though, on BBC One, it's time for our news teams where you are. Good night.